Tsk7aksaltn. Goes back time, eh? And how it's already caught up to us. I was a leader back in the 80s. The importance at that time that I seen was our language, culture, and the land. The three things tied together. And that's what the elders have taught me. One of the things that when I got started, I was a leader then too. And I seen the ways what were happening. The government, their move is what is today. You're fighting still the same thing back then. Only it's getting worse. Dollars are being cut. When I was a leader, I had to go before the council and ask the council if we could save our language. The council came back and said, no, we're not funding it. Everything came to a halt from then on. It's never been. So when I got involved, one of the things that I really seen was our children, and the children that were unborn yet. How can we help them? Everybody had problems from not understanding who we are, our identity. Our identity is the most important thing. We're Splatsin. And we're Secwepemc. Those two things. I spent time with Rosalind, working with Rosalind. We sat down, we worked together, and we worked with the elders. Ever since then, from 1980 on till to this day, our main focus has always been the language and culture. And a lot of you have seen what has happened. And one of the things that we gave was stability. Stability for our children. The building that you see that's sitting there, it's not owned by us, it's owned by the children. The elders' room started in the basement, still teaching our culture, our language, history, name giving, all that stuff. That's important. That's what's being Splatsin. With all that, we were caught up doing all this. But the one focus that we always tried to do was to preserve our language, our culture, our history. And like we said today, the time is now changing. The changes are computers. We've got comments, people saying, well, why are you putting it online? Or people aren't learning that. So other people are learning it more than our people. Well, we have to go with technology. And if we don't, I think it was this spring I came before council. One of the things that I talked about, and only preservation of our language. In order to do that, we sat down and we did some studies. And we told the council, we have 4 years left to do it. That's how long our elders are going to be here, 4 years. After that, the other 4 years is the technical end, to get it all recorded. And now we're faced with a lot of other things, what's happening since 1980. Land claims, the big issue. And if we don't do it right, we're going to lose. And to me, I guess that's what I really focus on in the last few years, and I am still today, is the preservation of our language. How are we going to preserve it? I gave you a cost. The cost was then, it was $180,000 a year. For 4 years, you've got to spend that. That's $250,000. 8 years is over $1 million. There's your cost. That's what it boils down to. And I also went around and said, what is your language worth to you? I asked my granddaughter that. You know what she said it was worth? She went to her room and grabbed her piggy bank, gave me all of her money. That's what her language was worth to her. I broke it down because our people are so poor, it works out to 86 cents a day. That's what your language costs, to preserve it, not to do anything else, just to preserve it. The question that we talk about is all our children. I think we have taken the step, my wife and I, and especially Marion, we have taught our children, our grandchildren, the language as much as we can. We do our prayers, and the only time that you can really spend time is with your family. It's at the dinner table. And if you don't, if you eat by a television, then you're not doing things properly. Our community, our people, that's how we ate. We ate at the family table. We always gather at the table. And that's the only time is when you can talk to your family. And it's the only time I can talk to them is when we're at the table. And the question is, today from young people, you'll get the answer. You guys are from the dinosaur age. That's what I get from my son. Oh, that's the past. But the one thing that we have to remember is who we are. We're not Canadians. We're not German. It's in your heart. You're brought up on this land. Kahal is a real important ground here. There was a big meeting here that saved the white people from being wiped out. Do you know that? One priest went around and gathered all the people to meet here at Kahal to stop the war, or otherwise we would have lost the war. Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. That's your history. That's why it's so important that everybody gets to speak. And we talk about ourselves. How are we going to do things? I know it's really hard for us because my wife has not been very healthy, but she never gives up. That's what I like about her. And our young people today are affected. I wouldn't say they're young people. Wayne just mentioned one today. And there's more, there's quite a few others too that are in close to the end. Because we're brought up in this world, this generation, my generation, we're brought up by chemicals. The food that we're eating is killing us. Very simple, that's all it is. The food we're eating, and we're trying to eat healthy. So I don't know what's going to happen. That's why I gave a 4-year period. From my talks with, and see what's going on with our elders. So that's one of the things that I see that has to be done. And the other thing is, what's going to do with this 4-year that we have? It's a 4-year period left. What elders you have. The only way you're going to keep them together is you've got to have an elders lodge, not an old folks home. I hate that word. But I've gone around and I've seen a lot. And one of the biggest things that has to happen is you've got to house them, to keep them together, and make sure that they're eating properly. Because they've lasted longer than a lot of us have. And you can look back and you'll see how old a lot of them that we've lost. That's the step that we're going to have to take, is you're going to have to take the step of looking after us, our leader, and the rest of us. What are you going to do? You're just going to shove them off into an old folks home and leave them there and let them die? That's what's happening to our younger people. They're dying. They all want to come home. And we talk about how we're going to do that. We can't build homes for everybody the same. but we can make changes to that, to design homes for people up and coming. So since 1980, since I've come back, that's how important our language, our culture, and who we are. And I had the pleasure of spending a lot of time with the elders in those rooms that we have at the center. And that's the only part that's left for our elders, is that room. It's unlicensed. It has nothing to do with our government or our governments out there. It's the room for the elders. That's where they come. And to this day, a lot of people have asked me to come there so they could have meetings there. They don't want to have meetings uptown. They don't want to have meetings at the chamber. They want to come to our center at the Elders Lodge, or our Elders Room, the Elders Nest. And the reason I always ask them, why do you want to come up at our place? We could meet downtown, we're close to town. No. There's peacefulness in it. That room has peace. It's the only room that never gets political. That's the whole thing that I've been trying to express at that center since I started in 1980. That's what's the cause and the root of our problem. Political. We get political. Okay, so with that I'd like to stop. And so that's how important the language is to me, and that's why I'm here today. I'm here for the elders too. So it really boils down to money. That's what it boils down to. And it's never been, and it's true. Rosalind has spent a lot of time. The books that we've created is our history, part of our history. That's only a small portion. I think we got 4 or 5 books out. That's a small, small portion of our history. It's there. But that is like I was telling you about. We have to get little bits of pockets of money. And we put it together. And every cent that I've spent on our center goes back to the children and to our elders. It never has gone to any of us. We could have gone out there and did some bragging rights. We were 4th in Canada, our center. We don't need to go out there and brag. It's more important that we spend our money on our elders and our kids and our language and our culture. If they want to know about our center, the door's always been open to everyone. And I keep telling them that. And people have come through there. Universities, people from back east. And we have a lot of good phrases. And the recent one was from the suicide prevention that we put on. You know, we were the top all across Canada and the United States. That suicide went on. We were number 1. We were rated number 1. That's how we do. There's your answer. Throw the political stuff all out and sit down as people. There's your answer. I learned that in 1980. Okay, with that I'd like to close because I will be gone for an hour, a couple hours, and I'll be back. Okay, thank you.
Quiet.
Afternoon now.
Thank you, Cooks. We're going to start again. Brother here, Earl, will start. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Especially our elders. I honor you. Because I was raised by Lally Lassiter. Still miss her today. I'm very fond of my elder. Today I look at her and I look at today where this is going. The children are very important in our culture and our language. Before I went to residential school, that's all I taught was my language. And I used to argue with the elders when I was a little guy. And they all laughed at me when how come they make poke fun of me. But said, they thought it was so cute that it was a young boy that spoke my language. They laughed at me and they were very proud of me. But since coming back to the community, I listened to the elders speaking our language. Today, it warms the heart, it warms my spirit to hear them talk in our language. The songs, the drums. I wish I didn't lose that precious gift that my grandmother gave me. Because my mother left me there, and they raised me. You know, coming back to the reserve, I didn't know anybody when I came back. Not even my family. Felt lost and alone. Today my kids ask me, when they were young, who was their family? I didn't know myself because I was worked off reserve. And so many years I didn't even, I spent limited time on reserve. What is very important in our language is, you know, the family tree, because we got people coming back to the reserve and they're wondering who their family is. You know, and I got relatives down in Kootenays. And I got relatives in the Okanagan Nation. And I got relatives in Chase. So when the 60s school and the residential school, they broke us up, and I lost my language. So it's very hard for me to connect to my family because I don't know them, because they passed on. But I always thought that our language was priority. Because what are we going to leave for the children coming behind us, or else my grandchildren? Or we could leave some damages there, or we could leave them some pain. I don't want that to happen to the next generation to come behind us. I think the family tree in the native land is very important because I was in the residential school and I went through a lot of pain and heartaches, and I still go through a lot of triggers today, but I can handle it. I still need counseling. You know, and so some of these lists, I'll just read them out right now. And you know, the history timeline of the things occurred for the Splatsin Nation, the 60s school. An explanation how the language defined our Splatsin culture and our spirituality. An example of the spiritual practice of the Splatsin people. There's many things we lost in this community. The protocols. And so as a little boy, I could remember over in India where the white people used to talk our language right to the T when I was a small boy. To some of us. And our people were very close at the time. I could remember the elders used to spend a lot of time where Jimmy, Charlie, and Lally lived. We had a lot of visitors. People were very close back those days. the church was full, you know, we had plenty of horses on reserve. People helped one another. You know, and when the family, when a newborn child was born in reserve, the ladies used to get together and go to that family, give them clothes, baby clothes and that. That was an honor, and that was one of the traditions, because back those days, you know, the unconditional love was very strong among the people. They took a lot of pride in their children. When the family that passed on, they were always there for them. Today I don't see that. And we lost that culture. We lost that unity. You know, and so I miss that song, I miss the language when I was in those schools. You know, sometimes so what am I going to leave for my grandchildren? Am I going to leave them the pain what I went through? I think it's up to us as First Nation of the Splatsin. We got to provide them with a gift for many generations to come. I lost my language. I love to learn my culture. And I honor the drums here and the song, the stick game. You know, it hurts to say that. It's coming from the heart because every time I think about my grandmother that loved me so much. There was no love in those schools. Even in foster home. We were lost children. I lost my culture, I lost my identity. You know, I'm happy that I know my people today. I'm proud of what they're becoming, a young adult. Well, I talk about it, I wish kids were here at the schools. We should do a survey of the students that wanting what they want from this outcome of this meeting. The language is so very powerful because that's our identity, the spirituality, the protocol. We lost so many tools here, and we're slowly venturing, learning from our community. And I honor those people that share in our language, the song, the stick game. There's a lot of pride and a lot of identity there. When I came back to the reserve, I was a summer student. I don't want to be a summer student. I want to be a proud First Nation. Too bad I lost that, but today I could come back and listen to the elders speak, and I honor them. Because it's slowly coming back to me, the teaching. So, you know, our elders are the knowledge keeper of our community. And they're very spiritual, they're very gentle. So with that, and I'll close. And I thank you for everything, for the general term.
Wayne Brown. Summit Maine, Jean Thomas Brown. I think that returning back to the community back in the early 80s, very familiar with some of the projects that Rosalind talked about with Cindy and our Kuipers, and really proud to say that I had a small link in that connection, and proud to say that our Tahiti school has some teachings that help with the language. Proud to say that and honor our elders that are here today with all the language projects, and I really hate to say projects, but because of the funding and hard work that they all do, the honor is not really seen by a lot of our families. And one of the areas that I really believe that the family tree has been part and parcel of our language and our culture, getting to know who I was related to, getting to know how close I was related to people. And I think that just in the past couple of years, I found lots of family through my mom's side of the family, covering from Invermere down into the Kootenays, and realizing how closely I was related to other people here through those particular families. And kind of exciting, but kind of scary at the same time. So I have a great grandchild today that she's not really familiar with the language because I don't speak it. I think that something that I'm encouraging myself to learn, and say thank you to Lola and Beverly and Juanita and Arnold. Their sister Virginia was influential in putting a disc together through the help of the Celesta Center. I listened to that, and I'm learning the different things that I need to know so that I can pass it on. I think that's really, really important to honor our family members that have been involved with maintaining and keeping our language going. I think that some of the crafts that both my mom and my dad and our cousins have been influential in, and we talk about culture. My dad, I'm very proud that he was able to pass on some of his skills, the carving of dugout canoes, the spear making, and I know that there's other families here that are connected to that too. But I think that the buckskin gloves, my mom has I think a few pairs, different kinds of work gloves and fancy gloves that are in the museum in Armstrong. Some of the booklets that were done, I think that's when Rosalind was first involved with the language and the programs before Celesta became Celesta. So I'd just like to honor Rosalind and all the elders that continue to do that work. And it has an influence, and we need to infiltrate the rest of our communities through our families, and being involved at a political level. And I know that politics isn't part of this, but when I was on council, I sat on the Secwepemc Cultural Education Society board for a few years, and some of the skills that they put together in packages, I think that you're talking about toolkits. That might be a place that's already developed. If we have access to some more of that material, I think that things are possible. We do have a few influential speakers that are still speaking, and because of the dialect and the differences, I think that those toolkits can be revised and addressed to our community members and our families. I have lots to say, but I know I'm on a time limit, so I just want to say thank you all. Thank you. Next time.
Item, Salsa. Wasn't really expecting to say anything right now, but I guess when I was thinking about the language and culture and the importance of that, as a young person this morning, I was trying to think, like, what would I say, you know, if I was asked to talk at the meeting. And I guess when I was sitting here listening to people talking, one of the things that I remembered when I went away to Victoria, when I was at school, I had to live in a place where there was lots of people that were in school that came from all over the world. They were like from Russia, you know, and they were from all different places like in Europe and all over Canada. There were all different kinds of cultures and races of people. And when I was away, I was really starting to get like homesick, you know, to be back here at Splatsin. And one of the things that I noticed about the people that were living there, you know, was that when they traveled out, some of them, you know, they would travel out and they'd always travel like with their families, you know. And when I noticed that, that was one of the things that I really started to miss about being, you know, at home, was having, you know, meetings like this, you know, where we all came, you know, and people would talk and stuff. And I did a lot of listening at those meetings when I was younger. And I remember looking in some of the band archive stuff, seeing pictures of myself, you know, sleeping at the band meetings, you know, and stuff like that. And there was a family that lived next door to the house that I lived in, and those people were Russian. And one time we got invited over to go to their house, and one of the things that I recognized when we went over there was that even the young, like small kids that were in their household spoke Russian. And when I went in there, I couldn't understand, you know, what their families were saying, because they were all speaking in Russian. And when I walked away from there, that's one of the things that I really felt like as a young person, I would like to, you know that. I'd like to go around as a Splatsin person, you know, and be able to talk in my own, you know, language. And I know that, like, us, like, young people, we always joke around, you know, the words that we learn, you know, we're kind of saying that, you know, when we came in here, joking around and saying, like, some of the words that we learned as young people, you know, the first one was, like, you know, la, you know, or if people really wanted you to get out of the way, la, you know, la, or skalo, you know, and stuff like that. So we kind of joke about it, but there's always that pride, you know, as a Splatsin person, even just those little words, you know, like the fact that I do know, you know, some little words, you know, and I know a little bit. And I was thinking about that, like, you know, coming here, like, why don't I go, you know, and learn more, you know, go around, you know, more as a young person. And I heard some of the people here make reference to that, you know, like what would draw the young people out. And I was thinking about that, like, you know, we're so involved in, like, whatever problems, you know, we think our problems are big problems, or, you know, things that we gotta to do. And then when I come in here, I realize, you know, like, this is the important thing. Like, it doesn't matter what I thought was important for today. Like, this is important. You know, and I'm really glad that we have returned back to this place of Hall Hall. It feels good, like, it felt good coming in here, and it feels good, you know. I want to thank you for the opportunity to come here, you know, and to have a meeting in this way in our place, you know, here in Hall Hall. It feels good, and it feels good to, you know, come here and be fed, you know, and for people to be able to come and, you know, listen to each other. And I feel, you know, great about, you know, having all the elders here, you know, in the room. That really feels good. Ooh. And I heard the boo, so I better hurry up. And I just want to say, like, I hope whatever, you know, work goes on, like, I think the question was raised, like, is it going forward, like, you know, with, like, what the elders have to say, or is it listening to what the young people have to say? And I think myself as a young person, you know, my role is to try to listen, you know, if the elders are teaching, you know, or they're saying something, I want to learn what that is, you know, and I want to learn, you know, what those old teachings are. So if there's something, you know, that any of the elders need, you know, as a young person, you know, I'll be there to, if you want to call on me, you know, in any way that I can help, because I really don't know what the answers would be. I just know, like, in my heart that it feels really important. And this feels really good, and it feels like a place of pride to be here, you know, and to be asked as a young person to come and talk. Woo-hoo. So. So that's all my relations. I better get off here before I get a third whoo.
Ever since I I was young, like me and my brother, you know, we always hung around elders, whether they be drinking or whether or not they just be hanging around. You know, that's what we did, and regardless of the substance abuse that was going on in that, you know, we learned some things. And it's not, I never, you know, I always told Stevie as we were growing up, it's not a matter of what people do. You know, a lot of people got criticized as drinking and all that, but if you actually sat and listened to them, what they had to say, you know, a lot of elders and a lot of people even nowadays where they say, you know, get that liquid courage just so we can say what's on our mind, what we feel in our hearts and that, and whether it be good or bad. And even though sometimes we didn't understand them regardless of the language, you know, we could just emphasize of just seeing their body language, seeing how they were reacting when they spoke. And listening to my dad, what he used to say, even listening to my grandma. You know, they talked about people coming together. They made time for each other. They made time, whether it be, you know, a quick evening at the door and stay for a couple hours. And I noticed that during the last 2 years, that's what I was doing within our community and that. And, you know, I sit there for the first 2 minutes and that, and people were saying, well, what do you want? Like, what do you want out of this visit? And it was like, holy, I don't want anything. I just want to, you know, just want to visit and talk to you. And that's what it's come down to these days. It's like, you know, people always expect that you want something in return. The reason why they're visiting is because you expect something out of them. And, you know, this year was really fun for me because I ended up meeting about probably 12 different community members, people that I would never really, you know, sit and actually talk to. And it was quite interesting, the stories that I learned from them. And, you know, the outcome of it is that making time. They say, you know, we get lonely, even as young elders, we get lonely because no one comes to see us. And I can only imagine of how the older elders feel. And our children are the same way. You know, some of them don't get to go out much. And I know as listening to stories and watching videos of our elders before is that, you know, they visited for, you know, 1 to 2 weeks just straight. They have issues amongst each other. They came together and they sorted it out. So by the end of their visit, everything was fine. They looked forward to the next visit. And that's the same thing with helping. And that's the same way I feel about our language. Make it fun. You know, my mom had us learning the language when we started having our kids. And, you know, at home she had everything written out, how it was supposed to be written out. And she'd make us say what like played or the bathroom. And we had our kids growing up and learning that, and she made it fun. She made it fun for all of us, and like even with us. You know, my dad, you know, shedded some tears because he never thought that we'd ever learn the language. Because us growing up as kids, we didn't really speak it, so my thing is that, you know, we're talking about the language, and I think the main important thing about it is that we come together and visit more, because visiting, you're going to learn it more that way, you know, and that's all that I can contribute and share how I feel about the language.
I'm gonna just go point. Wide up, Agnes Celesta. When we talk about what we learn from our people, the first thing I learned was who my family was. There wasn't a day I wasn't told to go see my granny. Granny always needed help with something. Go help Granny. And if it's not Granny Agnes that needs help, it's someone in that house that needs help. My granny taught me to never turn your back on family, to look after your own. She was one of the oldest foster parents from our child welfare program. That made me proud, because I knew she could take care of people. What Laureen talked about, the addictions, our family, there's a lot of our family still in the child welfare system today.
But everybody's switched and trying to work on themselves and trying to heal. There's a lot of hurts that went by. The 60 scoop, the residential school, we've all been addressing it slowly to heal. And that's one of the first things that we know in order to get our elders to start talking, is to tell them they're allowed to talk again. Just from Granny Agnes, that's a big name for me to have to stand up for. So I was just bugging Emmeline earlier. If all the Kiatas had their old canes, everybody would listen. Because we never, as old as she was, as weak as she was, we would never hurt our granny. She raised her great nephews, children. My dad said, you don't have to beg for some company. You don't have to beg to hear stories. Just come to your family. We'll tell you all you need. I still to this day come to my cousin Emmeline and Celestine. And my cousins, they're the ones where I say, if you want to learn to fish, these are the family to go to. You want to go hunt. We never were far from Don and Annie and them. Their family was always out there. I know where my territory is. I know where the fishing grounds. What I want out of this meeting is we do need a central space for these teachings to continue. Rosalind, we've got a lot of, I'm so proud. I'm a young Kiaa myself. My grandsons talk all the time, Mason and Cadence, about what they're learning. And they are continuing up at Shihihia. And I said that made me proud. They're able to sit there and talk to me. They're all happy. They can say sentences. My mom, she went and said something at the meeting. My grandson stopped her. Marion is right there. She talks to us all the time, our elder. She knows. And I said, yes, she does. She's a good teacher. So even with myself that I'm out there openly learning the language, my dad told me there's certain things that I had to learn. I'm glad Laureen, she's right there, because she's the one told to continue it, to continue the drumming, to continue the singing. But everyone in my family has a job. My older brothers, you don't see them very often. Stan, Kaz, and Lyle. Every season they're ready to go make the harpoons and spears and help with the nets for the annual fish. They've been hurting this last year since both their parents left. And that's what I mean. It's always the women in the families that when the men are hurting, that's who they lean on. And so yes, when I start coming, I do need support. Because all of my grannies are both gone. And Laureen stated the alcoholism in that. Our family never left ours alone. We never put them in a home if we didn't have to. And that's why I'm glad to hear from some of these and to seeing some of them are being taken care of at home. But yeah, that's where we have to start coming together and actually start to care for them. The eldest facility that got brought up, just keep them home. Keep them close to the families. Don't cut them off. Because we are still learning, and it's the only time I'm able to feel like a little kid again is, because like Laureen stated, they don't want nothing from me. They just want me to listen. So that's all I'm here today to do, is just to listen and learn. Good job.
Good morning, my name is Ida Alexander. When I grew up, my grandmother was the last medicine woman, and I thought because of her being that woman that she was strong and knew a lot of people throughout the shoe shop area, helping them and everything. And she always taught me how she was treated bad in residential, that she spoke her language, and when she spoke her language, she was always punished. So when I grew up, she brought me up the same way. She said, our language is no good. Never learn it, so that's the way I am still today. But I'm glad the words, I was stubborn when she was on her deathbed of cancer. I told her I want to know, so she started learning, teaching me from 1 to 10, and I was just grateful to learn that. And it takes a lot to learn a language. I've learned different languages from girls in high school. We had secret languages that boys never understood. They were called Beta and Gamma, and I still know those languages from the bottom of my heart, and I wish I knew the Shuswap language like that. Because as I grew up, there's a lot of developments and everything going on around our place that we can't control, and the only way we can control it is if we work together. And when we go to meetings and when you don't want the Sema to understand, sometimes when I talk, I wish I could talk to the elders in my own language and tell them what I feel and what I learned from school, but I can't because I never learned the language. And that's because my grandmother said it's no good. But today I still carry on whatever I hear, whatever I listen to, I still try to learn. And yeah, there needs to be a central place for people to gather to learn the language so our children can learn, and when they grow, to help when things happen to our community, that we all work together for our young and for ourselves. Thank you.
Wait, why the sweat? Sweat, squasty kachem. The kachem lo. Het prekst ek, ulpekst ek, chilkst. Look chakas. Gekokolutis look at la ooit is kalamuchnam. I can have a big profile, all the money in the world. But my grandma said, you don't need paper. For 5 years, I was like this bug here. She spoke to me for 5 years in a language. She didn't get paid. She didn't ask for money. She spoke to me in a high language. 2 hours every evening. She had a stick by the door. Annie, a moot in the alley. My Untitled Chapter. Ellen, if I didn't listen, I got smacked. You Elna, Clem Nasuch Kleines Peluluk. Dotly mas Kultas Chutness Kokolut. Dot, they would Naska in a residential school. June. Dotly Slats Kalamuchinam, Squad Animus Justice Sama. The white people make fun of my language. Called me a heathen because I spoke my language, so I done away with that. I told my children, my son, my daughter, learn English. That's what the Sema wants you to do so he can succeed in this world. But I got married to a non-white. But I still kept talking to myself in the language. I had nobody to talk to, so I kept it alive, my language. Until Rosalind came, I don't know, it was in the 80s. And she started the language through the SFU. I have heard the thank. I learned how to write my language. I have to thank Rosin because today I have a language. I can speak it fluently because I was fully immersed for 5 years. No English. So I commend Rosin for introducing the full immersion at the Splatsin daycare. You will produce speakers like Kachan. Gemaakt populutis in de Splatsinach. Die nasus gegooid het hand. Maar lotien met Sema. When you have meetings, that's how they won the war in the First and the Second World War. Because nobody knew the language of Secwepemc. so they could place all I don't know the older people's names there, like Gloria Morgan's dad and them. They were placed here and there during the war. And they could speak to themselves in Secwepemc, and the enemy couldn't understand what they were talking about. I think mainly it was through their speaking the Secwepemc that they could law China against the enemy. I think that's why they won the war. I think that's the way Rosin will win the war, is to bring back, lost my bug. I didn't hear it. Somebody killed it. And lost my train. But I'm a storyteller. I could tell stories in the language because my grandma spent 2 hours each evening telling me this Chaptakla for 2 hours. You know, that's why I know some of the higher words, you know. And I know how scary it is, Wayne, not to know your language. But you're like a child. You have courage, you learn if you hang around with the kias that are fluent. You're just like a child. Take it a step at a time. One thing is I never make fun of a non-speaker. If you hang around with these kias, you'll be fully immersed, you know. Spend a lot of time with the kias. You haven't got very much time to spend. Like, I'm not afraid to tell you, I'm 68 years old. How many more years do you have left to listen to Marie, Flo, Emmeline, Celestine? You can't count how many elders are left to teach you. It's a shame. My sister and I, we had a language. Marion tried to put a language group together. But when we came there to teach, there was just only my sister and I. We wait and wait and wait. Nobody showed up. It really broke my heart. They said language is important. You haven't got very many years. Marion, you know, all the fluent speakers you got, you can count them on your hand. You say language is important. Get rid of this paper. Get rid of the talk. Just help Rosin with her full immersion. My grandmother didn't need money to speak to me. My dad didn't need money. She spoke, you know, in the home. Full immersion. It's about time to get rid of the paper. It's not our way to produce speakers. We can talk and talk and talk. Just do it. Ukshchan, white sweat. Yes, lots of Usman are it Colaminda. To Upakstianahu. You know, Chukuskala Ustcolamins. Takia Marie. Cotianahu niet mas Chumachs. Het is Celestine. Oinig Tianahu is zo machs. Hier goed is till Geistesse. Celestine, Marie, Florence, Emmeline. Goed Chini is Kokeloets en is Secwepemc. Emmeline. Zielen Kia. Dat ik spojatsi with school. Chukno is Secwepemc is Kokeloets en in de Kia as een Negikus. dat ik ook de kanema Emmeline is met naams. Ge Emmeline al je hebt bekend is zoeken stokkeloet is maar daar is te mameld is stokkeloet een schop met naam. Maar oh Babke is toch graag stad gemaakt. Just do it, troep de Emmeline. Koekschem.
That was pretty good speech there. Coming from the heart. I was just, maybe you touched me pretty good there. Imagine just imagine if I was proud of my heritage and where I came from. Like the old days. Imagine if I was raised up with all my forefathers and they could have touched me and taught me the language, teach me how to hunt the way they did, named all the mountains. I would know all the name of the mountains around here, all the native names of the mountains. Just imagine, eh? We didn't have all the stuff that the settlers brought. And you know, I wasn't always proud of being a native because we're always looked at and stereotyped as drunks, and people walking down the street. The few people that are down there drinking, and you know, but you take a child, and they don't get that way for no reason whatsoever. And the big deal is the government and the churches, what they did to us, right? And I know we have to forgive them in order to move forward. And you know, and that's the only way we can do that. That's the only way we can move forward is to forgive the people that we hurt or didn't get along with, and all the drinking and stuff that happened in the past. And in order for our people to move forward, we have to forgive each other. And in order to, I guess, to learn the language, it's just like, I never even thought of it, the language very much. My mom spoke lots and she tried to teach me whatever she can. But I still wasn't proud as a native as I am today. And it's just an outlook that we need it. It's just like the Germans. The Germans have their language, the Chinese have their language. Everything's a part of that, of their heritage and everything that goes along with that. And with us, we're not whole until we learn the language. And we learn how to speak the language fluently. And I know it's an emergency situation right now with the elders and stuff. And I know I want to take some steps forward, and just coming to this meeting, I was just going to come here, well, for lunch and some other stuff. But, you know, I just started thinking about it, how it affected me. And you know, to be able to teach my daughter, Samantha and stuff, the fluent language and the way that we were and the peaceful people that we were, long before any non-native came to our lands, you know, would be just such a great feeling, because, you know, we're not at peace right now with ourselves because we're not fluent, we don't know ourselves, we don't know who we are as natives, right? So what we got to do is find that, and then we'll be peace with ourselves. Thank you.
I believe that when you learn something, that whenever you learn or you remember something, there's always an emotion attached to it, right? So all the things that happened over residential school, there should be like anger, fear, sadness, and stuff. Those are all memories that are kept, that are holding us back a bit, right? And also, some of the good times you ever remember, or you always are having a happy time or anything like that, right? And I believe that emotion always leads to keeping a memory or learning something new, right? But it just seems like sometime now we got to get over our anger and over our fears to be able to learn and become happier, right? And know our true self-identity, right? Because if we're going to build our people, we should know our language. We should learn our language, because how are we going to be able to show people that we want to become stronger when we can't really grasp that we don't know our language yet? So if you have your own self-identity, you can become more of a stronger people, and bring up a stronger, more, people, right? So if you get over the anger, and then you could experience and learn the culture. Yeah. I don't know. But